Hello and welcome to this Flight Simulator X Steam Edition tutorial. Today we'll be flying the PMDG Boeing 737-800, which is part of the 737 NGX package. Today we'll just be doing a basic flight from Athens International Airport to Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. As you can see, today we're flying a Eurocypria Boeing 737-800. And yeah, we'll just be doing the very basic procedures. So bear in mind that in the real world these procedures are amplified and each airline have their own different way of doing things. But today I'll just show you some basic procedures for Flight Simulator which will allow you to fly very similar to the real world in Flight Simulator. So the first thing you want to do is go into the cockpit. So you can see today we're flying Eurocypria, which is an airline that sadly no longer exists. But for the purposes of today's flight, I thought it'd be a nice idea to use that airline. So the cockpit as we enter it is in a cold and dark state. So what you'd want to do is go to the overhead upper panel or overhead lower panel and just switch the battery master switch on. So if you go back to the virtual cockpit view, you can see that a couple of lights have come on, and more importantly the FMS has come on. So if we click onto the menu button, you can see there's PMDG setup. So over here you can set up how you want the aircraft to look. Again, 737s have customizable options, so you can change a few things. I've already customized it to the way I want. However, it's worth looking through this menu to customize various things if you want to. And then you can click the FS Actions box, and over here you can, for example, update the fuel. So today I've already put our fuel for Larnaca is 7,459 tons. This is very easy to obtain. If you go onto the SimBrief website and plan your route using SimBrief, which I'll put the link in the description, it will give you accurate numbers which you can program into the FMS. Again, if we click return and payload, I've already put our passengers, so we have a full flight today, 174 passengers with no cargo. So again, that information is on the SimBrief website and it's 100% free to use. Next, ground connections. So you can set the chocks, set the ground power, which I've already done. So now the aircraft has ground power connected, which we can see here. We've got the ground power unit connected. And you can also do air start, pitot covers, stuff like that. So if we click return and doors, our entry door is open for boarding, and you can also initiate pushback. So that is the basics. And the next thing you'll want to do is the preliminary pre-flight check. So if you go back into the overhead upper panel, the first thing you'd want to do is to put both IRS left and right switches into the nav position. So 1 and 2 into nav. Again, you'd verify that the crew oxygen is sufficient. So you can see here it's about 1,750 psi, which is fine. It's within the limits. And again, if we go back to the virtual cockpit, this alarm means we need to turn on the ground power. So 1 second, let's turn that on. Okay, so ground power available light was on and I just flicked the switch on. So it's always good to put the aircraft on ground power as soon as possible. Perfect. Again, now it's also good to verify the engine oil quantity. So we have 100% in both engines. And the hydraulic system quantity 100 in A and 99 in B. So that's perfect for today's flight. You can change that to the default view. Again, you'd also normally check in the real world emergency equipment such as the fire extinguisher and escape ropes, but for the purposes of the simulator we don't need to do that today. And you'd also check the maintenance documents of the aircraft. Now going back to the overhead upper panel, verify that the service interphone switch is off. You can check the engine panel here, make sure there's no abnormal indications. Passenger oxygen is in the normal position. Again, now slightly to the right, you do your Mach airspeed test, so number 1, number 2, and you can hear in the background a very faint buzz that indicates the test is working. Again with the stall warning, and that is fine. So now back to the virtual cockpit. The last thing you do for a preliminary pre-flight is check the circuit breakers, so behind the first officer's seat and behind the captain's seat. However, in Flight Simulator these buttons do not work, so bear in mind that, but in the real world you'd want to check it. Okay, that's preliminary pre-flight completed. Now we can begin to program the FMC for today's flight. So if you click the FMC, again it will bring back the menu enlarged, and we can simply click FMC, and this brings you to the ident page. So you'll verify again the model is correct of the aircraft, so 737-800 winglets. Our engine rating is 26K, and the navigation data is valid, so 2005, which is valid between April 23rd and May 21st. We are May the 4th today, so that's perfectly valid. Again, if you have an out-of-date database, don't worry. For Flight Simulator it's okay. However, in the real world, you definitely want to fly with the database that reflects what date it actually is on the day of your flight. Okay, next, click pause init. So reference airport, we're at Lima Golf Alpha Victor Airport, that's already inside. Again, sometimes it doesn't come preloaded, so you have to type in Lima Golf Alpha Victor and paste that into the correct box. Next, it says gate. We don't need to put that today, however we are gate B11, but I'll just leave that blank for now. Set IRS position. So normally what you do is click the next page button and copy the position from the GPS left box. You can see that the GPS left and GPS right have the same coordinates, so it's a very accurate position. And by clicking the button next to set IRS position, it will program those coordinates into the FMC and begin your IRS alignment. Perfect. Now if you click route, you can see it takes you to the route page. So origin airport is Lima Golf Alpha Victor, which is already on the scratch pad. So you can just paste that into origin. And destination is Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. So Lima, Charlie, Lima, Kilo. And if you had a company route, you could put that in there today. However, we don't have one. A flight number. So again, this is optional, but I do know that today is a Eurocypria flight. They used code Echo Charlie Alpha for their flight numbers. So I believe it's Echo Charlie Alpha. You can just make up any number. So I'll put 184. Flight 184. And runway, the departure runway in Athens today is 03 right. So you can just type in 03 Romeo, and that's your departure runway. Next, you can click next page, and you can now input your route from the SimBrief package. So again, SimBrief plans the whole flight for you and will tell you exactly what routing you need to take. So my routing, I can see that my first actual waypoint after the departure is Kilo Echo Alpha. So just type in Kilo Echo Alpha, put that into the first 2 box and click the button. and then we'll follow the airway Uniform Lima 995 to Romeo Delta Sierra. So important to note that the waypoint goes on the right hand side, so like you can see with Kilo Echo Alpha and Romeo Delta Sierra, and the airway, which is like the highway in the sky, goes into the via box. So we're going from Kilo Echo Alpha to Romeo Delta Sierra via the Uniform Lima 995 airway. So after Romeo Delta Sierra, we're following the Uniform Mike 601 airway, and you can see just as I typed that the primary flight display has begun to light up. So this means our IRS alignment has been successful, which is perfect. And after Uniform Mike 601, we're going to waypoint Everno, so Echo Victor Echo November Oscar, and then waypoint Mike 601 to Bonnet, so Bravo Oscar November Echo Kilo, and that's pretty much our flight. So not too many waypoints, taking us straight to Larnaca. So we can click execute now, or activate and execute, and we can click the departure arrival page and put our departure. So departure arrival, you can see Lima Golf Alpha Victor. Click the departure button with an arrow, and we can select our departure runway is 03 right, and according to our flight plan on SimBrief, it'll be the Kilo Echo Alpha 2 Tango departure. So Kilo Echo Alpha 2 Tango, we simply select it and click execute, and looking at the chart, we can begin to put the course for the departure as well. So after takeoff, it'll be course 032, so you can put that in your MCP if you want, 032. I'll put it on the right side as well, 032. Again, that's not required, however, for the purposes of trying to be a bit realistic, we'll do it. And we'll put the runway heading as well as 032. Perfect. And that's for 03 right. Next, if we click departure arrival again and go to arrival, we can put our arrival for Larnaca. So it's going to be the Bonnet 1 Romeo arrival, and then the approach will be the ILS X-ray runway 22 and transition LCA1, and we can click execute again, and now you can click the legs page and also the plan view and just verify everything looks correct. So just click next, and you get a good overview of your flight, and everything looks fine, there's no discontinuities, so that's perfect. So now we can go back to the map view and click init ref and begin to do our performance data. So in the real world, this is normally done with the aid of an iPad or an application which airlines use called the OPT, which would help calculate your takeoff data, stuff like that. But today we'll just use the data that SimBrief gave us and input directly into the FNC. So I can see on the SimBrief pack that our zero fuel weight today is 60.3 tons. So just type 60.3 or decimal 3. And reserves, it's about 3 tons. And cost index today is going to be 10. And our cruising altitude is flight level 350, so you can type in 350 here. And it's also best practice to also put 350 into the pressurization panel as your flight altitude, so 35,000. You can also put your landing altitude, so I know Larnaca is pretty much sea level, but I'm going to put 50 feet. Today, seeing as we're just simulating the flight, we'll climb straight to flight level 350 after departure. So 350. Perfect. So speaking of that, we also need to click execute, and I've just realized that if we go onto the legs page, we should just double check that there aren't any altitude constraints that will affect our flight departure. No, it doesn't look like it, so that's fine. So back to init ref. We now need to enter the cruise wind. So again, on SimBrief, you'll see that there's an average wind. So in today's flight, it's going to be 271-36. So the wind is 271 degrees at 36 knots on average. And ISO deviation is +5, so simply put 5 and click the button and it will update for you. And everything else looks fine. So you can click execute and N1 limit. And again, Flight Simulator will automatically put this value for you. Again, in the real world, you do calculate the selected temperature using an application such as the OPT application, but for Flight Simulator you don't need to do it fully. So we can do 22k D rate and climb 2, and now go onto the takeoff page. And today let's plan for a flaps 5 takeoff, and it will ask you for the CG. So again, a good sort of rule of thumb for Flight Simulator is if you click the init ref page again and check your cruise center of gravity, so that's 23.5, simply add 4 to it, so it'll be 27.5 for takeoff. And this is just a rule of thumb. Bear in mind that the real world will be very different to this, but this normally works quite well within Flight Simulator. And now you can do your takeoff trim is 4.9, so just adjust your trim setting in your aircraft to be 4.9. And now your takeoff speeds. So V1 is 142, VR 143, and V2 148. So you can put 148 now straight into your IS Mach window, and that's your V2 takeoff safety speed. And if you click next page, if you want to follow a noise abatement procedure, you can. So for example, we can set 800 feet as our thrust reduction altitude, and our acceleration height will be 3000. You can simply put that inside and click execute, and that's the takeoff data completed. And again, normally the captain would be on the takeoff page and the first officer would stay on legs, and it would stay like this during the takeoff. So now we can actually begin with the pre-flight procedure. So to do this, we'd go to the overhead upper panel, overhead lower panel, and it's better to follow a flow with this. So we normally go from left to right, up to down, or up to down, left to right. So we'll start with the yaw damper, put the yaw damper switch on, and verify your navigation switches are in the normal position, display switches are in the auto position, fuel pumps, so you can turn one fuel pump on now for the APU, which we will start in a second, Again, verify all the DC panels and battery, everything looks correct. Cabin utility and flight entertainment on, ground powers on, and now we can go down and do our fire test. So in fact we should change view for this. We'll go to the captain's side, and now's a good time to do your fire test. So verify that all the lights are illuminated, and then check the master caution is lit up. You can now turn it off. So that's working fine, and just put this back into the center position, and you'd want to do the same for the cargo. So click test, and you can see the lights are illuminated and the fire warning switch comes up. And if you switch to the first officer seat, also check the free landing gear, so the APU light here, yep, the three greens, that's fine. Okay, so once you've successfully tested this and the APU, you can start the APU. So if you go back to the overhead lower panel and simply click start on APU, this will begin to start the APU, and you'll see in a moment the EGT will start to rise, which is what we need for the APU. In the meantime, we can continue with pre-flight. So emergency exit light switch is armed. Again, we've already refueled, so we can put the seatbelt signs on from now. Window heat would be next, so we need to switch it on. So left side on, right side on. Hydraulic pumps, so for on the ground, the engine pumps should be on and the electric pumps should be off, so that's fine. The doors, the forward entry door is open, we know about that, so that's okay. Now coming to the trim air, you put trim air on. Packs, can put the left and right pack in the auto position and your isolation valve open, and bleeds on. Verify your pressurization panel is correct and it's in the automatic mode, and you can see now the APU is started, so we can put the APU gens on bus, and this means in a moment we can disconnect the ground power. Next, just want to verify that your ignition is on the right hand side if it's the first flight of the day. Again, it's optional, each airline has a different policy, but normally for the first flight it should be on the right hand side. And you can just put the lights on as required, so for now I'll just put the logo light on. Now changing view to the virtual cockpit, we can do a light test, so the captain would normally do a light test now, and just verify, him and the first officer would verify that all the lights are illuminated, so everything looks fine. A light test is successful, and we can reset the fuel used, and we can also put our auto brake into the RTO position. One more thing which you should do as well is do the oxygen test. So for the simulator, just simply click and observe the cross, and that's pretty much the preliminary pre-flight completed. Again, you're kind of doing both the captain's and first officer's job by testing multiple things. The captain would also check the speed brake is in the down detent, that the throttles are idle, and the engine start levers are cut off. Okay, and now you could actually do the pre-flight checklist. So I'll put an example on the screen of a pre-flight checklist. Again, each airline would have a different version, but for the purposes of Flight Simulator, I've just put an example here, so you can see oxygen tested, We checked this 100%, so that's fine. Navigation transfer and display switches, so it's in the normal and auto position. Window heat, you can see the on lights for window heat, so that's fine. Air conditioning and pressurization. Packs are auto and the bleeds are on. Isolation valve is open, and we can observe that here it's in the open position. Pressurization mode selector, so that's in the auto position. Very important to keep that in the auto position. Next, check your flight instruments, so you'll verify that both tracks are the same, 301, 301. And you also verify your altitude. So today's QNH in Athens, I'm just getting it up now. So I've set Flight Simulator to use the real world weather, so we're just going to verify that it's correct. So the QNH is 1011. So to change from inches of mercury to hectopascals, simply click hectopascals and you can adjust it. So at the moment it's 1013, and I've just changed it to 1011, and do the same for the first officer. It's 1011. So that's fine. We've checked that. Auto brake RTO. That's in RTO now. Parking brake is set. You can see it's set. And the engine start levers are cut off. So that's the pre-flight checklist completed. So now what we can do, assuming all the passengers have boarded and we're ready to go, we can start to disconnect the ground power and remove the air bridge. So if you click the menu button on the FMC and click FS Actions, click Ground Connections. Now that we started the APU, we can remove the ground power. And you can also remove the wheel chocks for pushback. And now we can also close the forward entry L door. And that is pretty much it. And if we change the view to outside, to remove the air bridge, if you have an air bridge, simply click Ctrl J on your keyboard and it will initiate the sequence to remove the air bridge. So you can see now it's slowly being pushed back away from the aircraft, and it will go inside, making it safe for pushback. By the way, I'll post a link to the scenery I'm using for Athens Airport. If you've ever been to Athens, you'll see it's very similar to this. So, very realistic scenery, I'd highly recommend it. So I'm now going to initiate the pushback. And whilst doing the pushback, you can begin your before start procedures. So you turn your fuel pumps on. So one is already on for the APU. We'll switch the other on. The center pumps, we have no fuel in the center tanks, so we don't need to put that on today. But we'll put on the other fuel pumps. And again, changing the view to the overhead lower panel, we can adjust the hydraulic switches. So again, for pushback, the A system should be off and the B should be on. We need to turn the packs off for engine start, and finally the anti-collision light on. And then you can follow the before start checklist if you want to. So I'll put an example on the screen of what that should look like, and we'll follow it very briefly now. So fasten seatbelt signs on, and we verify that the fasten seatbelt sign is on, checked. And by the way, pushback's completed, so I'm just going to put the parking brake on. Windows are locked. You can check all the windows are locked. Your MCP, verify that your speeds are there. We can arm the auto throttle. V2, your heading matches the runway heading, and your initial altitude is there. And your flight directors, verify that they're on. So captain is the pilot flying today. We'll put master on his side. And the first officer's flight director is also on. Takeoff speeds as well, verify the takeoff speeds. So V1 142 and V2 is 148. You can see that on the takeoff reference page as well. CDU Preflight, again, everything's being programmed. So CDU Preflight is completed. Fuel, we have 7.4 tons as you can see in total, with 6 pumps on, sorry, 4 pumps on because we have no fuel on the center tank. Rudder and aileron trim, you can see it's 3 and 0. Exterior and flight deck doors, it's all closed and locked, and you can visually verify it's locked. Hydraulic panel set with A off for the pushback, and air conditioning packs are off. You can verify they're off. Finally, the anti-collision light is on, and that's our before start checklist complete. So assuming now you've got the start clearance, you can switch the number 2 engine on first, which is the normal procedure. So move the engine start switch located here to the ground position, and start your timer, which is here, CHR. And normally you want to observe that the N2 is increasing to about 20-25% within around 30 seconds. So now it's 20, that's fine. So we can put the engine start lever number 2 into idle. And you can now see the start valve open is illuminated. And we can observe the EGT is increasing and the N1 is also increasing. And now the start valve light has disappeared, so starter cut off, and we check that the PSU light is extinguished, which it is, and that's fine. So now we can do the same process for engine number 1. So put it into the ground position and start your timer again. And now it's increasing, so N2 is coming alive, 20%. You can put the switch lever 1 into the idle position. And we can again observe the EGT is rising, the N1 is increasing, and it looks like a normal engine startup. Again, the lights disappeared, so the engines have now stabilized with no messages. So that looks fine. And now you can do your before taxi procedure. So again, normally at this point you would put the generators 1 and 2 on. So if you switch to the overhead lower panel again, switch generator 1 and generator 2 on. Put your probe heat switches into the on position. Anti-ice, you put it on if you require it. Today, however, is a warm day, so we don't need anti-ice. Again, coming down, we can select hydraulic A back on because pushback is completed. Packs we can put back into the auto position. Isolation valve also into the open position. Coming down, we can put the APU bleed air off. And we can switch the APU off as well because we've switched power to the engine generators. Move the starter switches into the continuous position. And you can change view now back to your virtual cockpit view. Now would be a good time to select your takeoff flaps. So it's going to be flaps 5 today, so move it to the flaps 5 position. And also transponder, you put that into the TA position. So traffic advisory only on the ground. And one more thing which the captain normally does is a flight controls check. So if you click onto the system page on the MFD, and you can test your flight controls. So pitch down, neutral, up, neutral, left, neutral, right, neutral, and you can also test your rudders. So full left and full right. Yep, that's tested fine. And at this point, again, you can do your before taxi checklist. So just verify that the generators are on. They are on. Probe heat is on. You can see it's on. Anti-ice is not required today. Air conditioning, the packs are auto and the bleeds are on. Isolation valve, that is now in the auto position. Engine start switches, they are both continuous for takeoff. APU is not required today. A recall, so the captain and first officer would both check their recall. So that's fine, no recall messages, good. Engine start levers in the idle descent and flight control, we check the flight controls. So everything looks fine now. We'll go back to the engine page and we can switch our taxi light on and our runway turn on lights on as well. And assuming we have the clearance to taxi, you can begin to taxi. So here in Athens Airport, we're going to taxi now to runway 03 right. So that is the runway that's just to our front left. So we'll taxi behind this AGN Airbus A320. So taxiing on Flight Simulator, again, you should aim for about 20 knots ground speed, so don't put too much power. We will now begin the taxi. And you can stop the timer as well because the engines have started. And assuming they've instructed us to taxi at our discretion, we will turn now to the next taxiway. Onto taxiway Charlie here in Athens Airport. And now onto taxiway Delta. So turning initially left and then back right onto the taxiway. And the plane just landed as well. Nice to see. So again, I'll put a link now to the traffic which I use for FS16. It's a very realistic package, and it downloads all the traffic live. So I believe it's called Ultimate Traffic Live. I've used it for many years, and yeah, you can see all the planes are very similar to the real planes that you'd get at Athens Airport, like the Aegean and Ryanair aircraft you can see in front of us. So it looks like Aegean is probably going to beat us to it today. So I'll let him go in front of me. So he is going to line up and go first, which gives us good time actually to do the before takeoff procedures and before takeoff checklist. And we'll just hold short here and wait for him to go. So put the parking brake on quickly. And now we can do the before takeoff procedure. So normally what you do is you do the lights, so turn off the taxi light and turn on your fixed landing lights. Again, you can turn on the strobe lights now, so if you move the switch up, strobe and steady, and that's what you need for the flight. And again, you'd need to put your transponder into the TARA mode. So at the moment it's TA only. Move the transponder now to TARA. And that's pretty much it. Again, to take off, you'd need to advance the thrust levers to about 40% N1, and then press the toggle button, which is just here, and the toggle will engage the auto throttle. So very important to press the toggle button. You can, if you want, program a keyboard key to do it for you. So on my keyboard it's Control-Shift-G, and that will click the button for you. And if you want now, you can also arm LNAV on the ground. So I'm going to do that now. Just makes life a bit easier when we engage the autopilot after takeoff. Okay, so now the Aegean's departed, we can taxi onto the runway. And we'll just line up and wait, and before taking off we will do the before takeoff checklist. Okay, so just now I'm going to put the parking brake on. And the before takeoff checklist. So flaps, we have flaps 5 with green light, checked. Stabilizer trim, 4.9 units, it's within the green band, check. Auto throttle is armed, check. Landing and strobe lights, they are on, checked. And the transponder, we just set that already to TARA, that's checked. Before takeoff check is completed. Assuming we have the takeoff clearance now, we can now advance the thrust levers. Again, press the ET button here if you want to time your flight. So I've clicked it now. So advance to 40%. Stabilize. You can now do toga. And that's our takeoff thrust set. And if you check the FMA, you can see it's in N1 and toga now. 80 knots. And approaching V1. We can rotate. So just a smooth, continuous rotation. And at positive rates, you can put your gear up. And at 400 feet, if you want, you can engage autopilot. So I'm going to put Command A on. So that's our autopilot engaged. And because it's 800 feet, it's switched to N1, so it's reduced our thrust for the takeoff, for the noise abatement. It's now on MCP speed. So now until 3000, it will just maintain like this. Now again, the takeoff, depending on what controller you're using, it's quite difficult to maintain centerline. I tried my best, but don't worry too much if you can't maintain the centerline properly. It's quite difficult, especially if you're using a controller which is very sensitive. So now 3000 feet, we can engage VNAV. Let's change to VNAV speed. So we can put the flaps to flaps 1. And then we just wait for the speed to increase. So you can see now the speed is going up. And once it passes 1, we can put the flaps up. And flaps up. And once the flaps are up, you just want to verify that the flaps are actually up and the light is not illuminated. So flaps up, no lights. And after takeoff, you'll switch the auto brake off, put the landing gear lever to the off position, and switch the engine start switches to the off position. And once you pass your transition altitude, you'd want to click set standard. So over here, if you click standard, this now sets your QNH to 1013 standard pressure. So you'd want to do that on both sides now. So standard. And if you wanted to, you could do the after takeoff checklist at this point. So we can check that the engine bleeds. Going to the overhead lower panel, engine bleeds are on. The packs are in the auto position. Again, virtual cockpit, landing gear is up and off. And the flaps are up with no lights, so we can verify that. And finally, your altitude. So we've set standard passing 8,000 feet, and that's also the same for the first officer. So now we're beginning to turn following our SID. And that's the, by the way, the after takeoff checklist completed. Now checking the turn on the SID. We're turning now to Kilo Echo Alpha, and we're going to follow the route which we initially inputted into the FMC. So the autopilot is working correctly, very nice. And now we've just passed flight level 10, so 10,000 feet. We can turn the lights off. And also you would normally turn off the fasten seatbelt signs, but what I'll do to make it realistic, I'll wait for us to level off after turning towards Kilo Echo Alpha, and then turn the fasten seatbelt sign off, because you don't want the passengers to feel uncomfortable. And we can now zoom out a bit, and it's always best practice to change the heading bug to match your current heading. So now it's about 186, we'll move it to 186, and in a second we're going to turn again to the left. So always in aviation, try and keep the heading bug centered to where you're flying to. That way it just makes it easier. For example, if your autopilot disengages, you'll have a reference heading. You'll know where you should be flying, which direction you should be flying. This is very important. And now the aircraft is beginning a shallow bank to the right. So if we click VNAV again and re-engage, let's again put VNAV speed. The reason why we're not accelerating is because of this speed restriction at Kilo Echo Alpha at 210 knots. But once we pass Kilo Echo Alpha, the aircraft will start to accelerate again. So the aircraft's pretty much level. We'll put the heading bug to match. And we can also turn off the fasten seatbelt sign. So on the seatbelts, just drag it off. And we're continuing our climb. So with regards to the speed restriction, that's only because it's stated on the chart, which I'll show on the screen, that there is a speed restriction of 210. But air traffic control might advise you that you can accelerate to a faster speed. So to do that, all you need to do is press the delete button on the legs page and do slash. So delete, and that now reduces the speed restriction, deletes the constraint, and if you click execute, you'll see that the aircraft will now begin to accelerate. So the commanded speed has now changed to 292, and if we engage VNAV again, the aircraft will accelerate to that commanded speed. So you don't always need to follow that restriction, because air traffic control could tell you otherwise. And if you wanted to simulate air traffic control giving you an unrestricted climb, you would simply delete the restriction on the legs page, and that will let you accelerate faster or climb above the altitude restriction. So after Kilo Echo Alpha, The next waypoint is Varix, which we can see. So at Kilo Echo Alpha, the aircraft will again turn left and follow the routing. And if you see this faint green T-C, that's our top of climb. So we will reach flight level 350 or 35,000 feet at that green point. Now the aircraft's turning to the left to follow the path to the next waypoint, Barracks, and onwards. And looking outside, you can see the stunning Greek scenery. So we just passed overhead Kilo Echo Alpha, which is actually an island, I believe, called Kia, below us. And we're going to fly now towards the island of Syros, which is just in front. So stunning scenery and pretty clear weather today as well, just a few clouds. And I'm flying the beautiful Eurocypria Boeing 737-800. Sadly, the airline Eurocypria does not exist anymore, which is a real shame, but it does live on in Flight Simulator. And again, if you wanted to download this repaint, I'll post the link into the description. I downloaded it online, and it's a great repaint, so highly recommend, and well done to whoever created it. And you can also adjust the navigation display. So you can put the weather radar on, for example, add stations, add waypoints, add airports. So I leave the airports on. You can change from weather to terrain if you want. There's a lot of functions you can do within the 737. And again, the more you fly on the simulator, the more you'll learn. The aircraft can do magical things. You can plot circles within the map, within the FMC, stuff like that. And PMDG have done a really good job at creating a really accurate simulation of the real 737. Again, if you fly the real aircraft, it behaves pretty much the same as this simulator. It's beautiful. So hats off to the team at PMDG for creating a really good add-on for FSX and really realistic. So now approaching our approaching flight level 280, we can do an RVSM check. So normally if flying above flight level 290, you need to have altimeters that are accurate within 200 feet between the captain and first officer's side. So we passed 28,000 feet and first officers at 28,100. So that's fine, that's within limits. So now theoretically we can climb above flight level 290. So that again adds to the realism of Flight Simulator if you wanted to do it a realistic way. And also, if you wanted to, I forgot to mention earlier, you can remove the engine view and just leave it on the upper DU, and it gives you a condensed view like this of N2, fuel flow, oil pressure, etc. Yeah, now to our left as well is the island of Mykonos, I believe. Famous island. And in fact, you can see the airport just underneath the aircraft. So, very nice. And I'm past flight level 300 now. So, only 4,500 feet to go. So now approaching flight level 330, 2,000 to go. And as we approach 340, which is 1 to go to 3,500, 350, you should engage vertical speed and put a rate of climb of 1,000 feet per minute. It's just best practice to make it a bit more comfortable, because if you're climbing with or descending with a high rate of climb or descent and the aircraft levels off, it will be a very sudden bank. So you can hear that warning, 1 to go, 1,000 feet to go. So it's good practice to engage vertical speed and put 1,000 or less if you wanted to make it more comfortable for the passengers on board the aircraft. Now we've leveled off. You can see it's changed from altitude required to altitude hold, and we can re-engage VNAV. So VNAV path and FMC speed. And we're in the cruise. So I'll put a link in the description to just before our top of descent. You can keep watching if you want, or you can skip to the before top of descent so we can prepare our approach into Larnaca. See you soon. Hello, welcome back. So now, as you can see on the navigation display, we are approaching our top of descent, which is in around 40 miles. So we can now start to begin to prepare our approach into Larnaca. So looking at the approach chart, we can see the localizer frequency is 110.3. So we can begin to program that in. So we'll put 110.3, and again, we will put that on the first officer's side as well. So 110.3. So that's now active on both sides. Next, the final approach course is 221 degrees. So we'll put course as 221. And again, we'll put that into the first officer's course. And we can see that the minimums for this approach would be 206 feet. Although today we're going to try and practice an Autoland. So if you don't know what an Autoland is, that's essentially if you're doing category C3, Bravo, Charlie, ILS, where the visibility is very low, you can practice Autolands. Today the weather's okay, but we'll still demonstrate an Autoland. And we'll put the decision altitude as 50 feet in that case, radio altitude. So if we go here and change from baro to radio, 50, we can put the same on the other side, radio, and we'll put 50. This is to practice the Autoland, which I'll demonstrate in this flight. So we can initiate the descent early if we like. So we can see on the legs page that the altitude constraints are as follows. So Bonek, we need to be 110 or above, Daros 900 or above, Atlas 6000 or above, etc. until Larnaca, which we have to be 4000 or above. I'm going to change Larnaca now to just 4000 straight because I want to be 4000 at Larnaca. So I'm going to do that and click execute. And I'm going to change our altitude now to 4000, assuming that we've been cleared to descend now straight away to 4000 feet. And if we go onto the descent page now, so DES, you can see a button that says descend now. So assuming we've got the clearance, we can click descend now and execute. And the aircraft now will start to descend to 4000 feet. But you can see now the next waypoint, Bonek 110, it says at Bonek 110 or above. So it's going to follow the constraints we have here. So Bonek 110 above, Daros 9000 or above, etc. So now the plane will automatically take this into account while descending. So let's align the heading now to our current heading. And now if we click init ref, it brings us to our approach reference page. So we can see again the ILS frequency 110.3, which we've already tuned in. And our final approach course is 221, which we can verify here. Now today let's aim for a flap 30 landing. So we'll select flaps 30, and that's what our VREF now at 147, and we will add 5 knots for wind correction. So double click here, wind correction 5 knots, and that's now programmed. And we'll go back to the descent page. Perfect. So now you can see in the distance that's the island of Cyprus, and everything looks very clear. The weather looks good. And we can check the Q&A chat Larnaca as well. So again, I've set Flight Simulator to use the real world weather. So today's QNH at Larnaca at the moment is 1008. So we can program that in from now because we've been told we can descend straight to 4,000 feet. So 1008 is there. Now to activate it, simply click standard again, and that's now using hectopascal 1008. And we can do the same on the first officer side. It's automatically set on the first officer side. You can change this setting within PMDG settings if you want. However, it's more convenient as we are only one person flying the flight simulator to automatically change both. Now for the Autoland, it's very important that both courses are set to the same number, 221, 221, and that the approach is frequency is put into both nav frequencies. So that's fine. So now we're continuing the descent. And what the aircraft will fly now is a continuous descent to Larnaca, as in the VOR at 4,000 feet. And it should automatically take into account those altitude constraints which we mentioned earlier. So again, Bonek, Daros, Atlas, and Otessa, which all have altitude constraints due to the terrain around those waypoints. So you can see ahead that there are some mountains. The reason why there are altitude constraints is because of the mountains. And you can see we are approaching our actual descent profile. So the number is going from 600 to 500. It's going to decrease. And once we're within the required margin, the aircraft will start to descend using the FMC's rate of descent calculation. So at the moment it's 1,000 feet per minute. That will change once we've intercepted the correct profile. This is again because we started the descent early, it's delayed that process slightly. And you can see now already the FMA is now changed to retard. So this means that it's going to reduce the throttle now to idle, and our rate of descent now is increasing, and we are within the required margin. So right now this profile is very good, and we look to maintain it until Larnaca. So what we can do now as well is the descent checklist. So descending now, we can check that our landing altitude is set. So 50 feet checked. Larnaca I believe is 20 feet, so we've added a bit extra, but that's only because it goes from 0 straight to 50. So you can choose either 0 or 50. I prefer to put 50 in this case. Recall, we verify it's checked, so that's fine. Both recalls checked. Auto brake. Now for this landing, we'll set an auto brake of 2. So 2 is set. Landing data, VREF is set, and our minimums, we're going to practice the auto land, so it's 50 feet at radio altitude. And now we will delay the fasten belt sign until about flight level 20, only because it's a bit too soon I think to put it on from now. Flight level 20 is about 20 minutes from landing. It's a good time to do it. Okay, so now descending through flight level 200 or 20,000 feet in this case. We will put on the fasten seatbelt signs now. About 20 minutes from landing. We're just on the coast of Cyprus now and we're descending down. And looking at the navigation display, you can see our waypoints are in front of us. We have this here, which indicates that we will be level by 4,000 feet just before the VOR. And they call it the banana. That banana is always going to fluctuate because it depends on your rate of descent, on headwind, tailwind, that type of thing. So it's going to always change with your ground speed, your true airspeed, etc. And just ahead of us you can see the other end of the coast of Cyprus, and where my mouse cursor is now, that's Larnaca Airport, and this is the Bay of Larnaca. So the approach will bring us overhead the airport, and we will turn to the left again, and come in for our ILS auto landing. As you can see here, it's approaching Bonek, and we're descending below 13,000 feet. So we are within the altitude constraint of 11,000 and above, and the computer's programmed a rate of descent that will follow the profile exactly as we require. Next waypoint now is Daros. Should have to be above 9,000. So now we're again following the profile, and it's still in arm mode, so the throttle is idle. Daros now, we're at about 10,000 feet, descending now to 9,000. So we're above 9,000 still. It's following that profile like it should be. You can see now the DME from the ILS has come in, so 2.6 DME. So we are within range of Larnaca now. Again, checking here the bubble. We will be 4,000 feet by the time we fly overhead the VOR, and it will bring us perfectly for the approach. So assuming now the air traffic controller has given us the approach clearance, we can do the approach checklist. So in this case, it will be the altimeters set and cross-check to local QNH. So we're at 1008 hectopascals at 8,940 feet, and that is checked on the first officer side as well, same hectopascals as well, so that's perfect. For the Autoland, it's required that it has to be the same. Next, approach H set and identified. So 110.8 is set here on nav1 and nav2, 110.3, sorry, and is identified. We have the indication here, India Lima Charlie at 221 with the DME distance decreasing, so it's identified. And that's the approach checklist complete. And we can decrease the range. So now we can see the airport's at about 15 miles. Flying overhead waypoint Ordena now, 5,000 and above, we're 5,800, so that's fine. And descending to 4,000 overhead VOR, which will be at this banana. And then once we fly overhead, we will descend to the next altitude, which is 1,500, which is our platform altitude for the ILS. And we've gone into FMC speed mode now again. And you can see straight ahead of us is the airport. Fantastic airport that is Larnaca. Again, I'll post the link to the add-on I've used for Larnaca in the description. You can see it's got the new terminal with the new tower and everything. The default FSX Larnaca is the old airport, which is only on the left hand side. It doesn't have the new terminal, so highly recommend to buy the add-on to reflect the latest terminal at Larnaca Airport. And we're now less than 1,000 feet away from 4,000 feet, and the rate of descent is good, 600 feet per minute. So we'll keep it, and then we'll set 1,500 while flying overhead the VOR. So assuming we've got the clearance now to do the ILS X-ray approach, we'll now start to turn to the left. We'll set 1,500 feet in the altitude window and follow the procedure. So you can see now we're flying outbound on the Bay of Larnaca. We've just passed overhead the airport, which I'll show you now, and following the approach. And the aircraft again is calculating the perfect rate of descent to capture 1,500 feet by our final approach fix. And I'm going to set flaps 1 now. And I'm also going to arm autopilot B for the Autoland. So we're now beginning the turn to intercept the ILS. And I'm going to put flaps 5. And you can see now the radio altimeters come in, 2500. And 1 to go until we reach 1,500. And as we reach 90 degrees, I'm going to now hit the Vorlock button, and Vorlock is now armed to capture the localizer. Vorlock's now captured, so we can now click the approach button, and this is now arming the glide slope. So glide slope is now armed. And you can see the runway is now coming to sight just ahead of us. We are 1 mile from the final approach fix. And MCP speed and glide slope. And we need to update the course. So it looks like the course changed. I'm not too sure why. If we click approach again. Very odd. So it looks like the Autoland won't work in this case, so we'll have to do the approach manually. We'll put the gear down now and select landing flaps. Very strange. I'm not too sure why the Autoland didn't want to work today. But we can continue landing manually, and the missed approach altitude is 2,000 feet. And quickly landing checklist, engine start switches we'll put now into continuous, speed brake we put in armed, landing gears down and free green, and flaps is now transitioning into 30. So we're on the perfect profile now. 200 feet I believe was the minimums, but we'll disengage the autopilot now and fly it manually to complete the landing. So on profile, slightly below, so add a bit of power. And again, not my best landing here. My control is not very good. But we will land it now. Okay, reduce the thrust. Manual braking. Trying to get back to the center line. Okay, apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. My flight control stick is not calibrated properly, and it's a lot of difficulty when trying to control, especially on takeoff and landing. But it's fine, we've landed now. Apologies, the Autoland didn't work as well. I'm not too sure why. I will investigate afterwards. Anyway, so now we roll out, vacate the runway, and we will hold short and complete the after landing procedure. So I normally just hold short and set the parking brake. This is because there's only one of me. It's not like the real world where the captain can taxi and I can do the checklist. So we have to do it all by ourselves. So you can turn the lights off now. In fact, we didn't turn the landing light on because it's daylight. But if you want, you can put the taxi light on. Transponder, we can turn that off now. Depending on airport, you'd want to keep it on TA, but we will leave it off today. Flaps, we can move up. So flaps are now up. Stabilizer trim, you'd want to put that to 5 units. First we can move the speed brake back up. And trim to around 5 units. That's fine. Speed brake, we just put in a down detent. Weather radar, turn that off. Auto brake, can put that off. Flight director switches, can also put off. Engine start switches off, and we can start the APU, and the probe heat we can also turn off. So that's the after landing procedure. We can now begin to taxi to the gate. So again, the same as taxiing for takeoff. Try not to taxi above 20 knots. And this is the new Larnaca Airport terminal now. You can see very realistic, much like the real Larnaca Airport. Again, I'll post a link to the add-on in the description. And I'm using this with Ultimate Traffic Live, which you can see has put traffic. Very realistic. And we'll just find a space now to the left. And what we can do, the APU is now started, so we can put them on buses. And this means now, very important, when we turn the engine off, that everything won't turn off because it's being powered by the APU. So let's go into stand number 25. So we'll turn now. And just ahead, you can see the sign guiding us in. In a second, it will tell us to stop. We need to go a bit more forward. And it says stop. So we can put the parking brake on now. We're going to switch off the engines. And we can turn the anti-collision light off and turn off the fast seatbelt signs. And then we can do the whole shutdown procedure. So we will put the fuel pumps off, again keeping one on for the APU. Window heat will turn off. So if we go back to the overhead upper panel, window heat off. Hydraulic power, like I mentioned earlier, we will keep the engine pumps on but switch the electric pumps off. Packs will leave auto. Isolation valve we should turn to the open position. APU bleed we can put on. And now coming down, we can turn the taxi lights off. Put the steady light on. In fact, we can leave that off. We can leave the logo light on. And switch the IRS mode selectors to the off position. And you can follow the shutdown checklist. So I'll put that on the screen now. So again, it tells us fasten seatbelt signs off. Electrical power is on the APU at the moment. Anti-collision light is off. So if I go back to the lower panel view overhead, anti-collision light is off. Fuel pumps, one is on for the APU. Window heat is off. Wing and engine anti-ice we didn't use, so it's off. Hydraulic panel, we've set that. Air conditioning, the packs are auto, bleeds on. Isolation valve is open. Exterior lights we've just set now. Flaps are up with no lights. So if I change the view to the virtual cockpit, we can see the flaps are up and there are no lights. Parking brake is set. We've got the light as well to indicate it's set. Engine start levers cut off and transponder is off. And that's our shutdown checklist. If you wanted to, you could now go into the FMC if it wants to load, click menu, click FS actions, and then on ground connections you can set the wheel chokes and add the ground power. You can also open the doors if you wanted to. And now that we've connected the ground power, we can switch to ground power. And this is it. This is the turnaround state of the aircraft here in Larnaca. Unfortunately, the air bridges don't work, so I can't connect the air bridge in this airport. But that's pretty much it. If you wanted to go a step further now and do the secure checklist, so let's assume you've landed and it's the last flight of the day, you'd need to do some actions to fully switch the aircraft off. So start with the galley power. We go to the overhead panel, you'd switch these off, so cab utilities and in-flight entertainment off. Emergency exit lights, switch that off, so now it says not armed. Air conditioning packs off. APU bleed is off, and then you put the ground power. First put the APU off, and then turn the ground power off. And after 2 minutes you can turn the battery master switch off. That's in a real world scenario. For the purposes of the simulator, I'm just going to do it from now. And that switches everything off. So this is the aircraft now in its cold and dark state again, fully parked up, everything's off, and the flight is completed. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it makes flying the PMDG 737 a bit easier. I know it's a bit of a complicated aircraft to fly. Once again, apologies for the ILS Autoland not working. I'm not too sure what happened, but we did continue the approach manually and managed to land okay. It looks like the course changed from 221 to 220 automatically. I'm not too sure why that happened. I will do a bit of investigating and find out. But yeah, hopefully in the next video we can try and auto land successfully. Yeah, once again, thank you very much for watching, and see you all again soon. Peace.